What's up, what's up? Welcome to another episode of All Over Voiceover with Kiff VH. I'm your host, Kiff VH. Thank you so much for joining us. And with me in studio today, the lovely, the talented Keythe Farley. Keythe, thank you so much for being here, man.
It's a pleasure.
I think this is the first time that I've seen you at meetings and stuff, but I think the first time we've ever really had a conversation, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you.
It's absolutely my pleasure to be here. I look forward to many, many more.
Me too. It'd be great. How did you? Where are you from? Where are you from originally?
Wow, I grew up all over California.
Okay.
I was born in Stockton, lived in Fremont, moved to Long Beach, which is sort of where I became a fan of the Los Angeles Dodgers and got into, fell in love with the radio. I used to come home after school in third and fourth grade, and I would string up a little radio, a little microphone up over my lamp on my desk in my bedroom. I put my record player out in front of me, and I'd play records, and I'd record it, and then I'd talk in between the records, and that was my idea of a afternoon's good fun, was talking into microphones. So the fact that I got to grow up and do that for a living has been a joy. I came up through radio. I was lucky enough to move to Sacramento. We had a radio station at my high school.
Oh, really?
So I cut my teeth there.
Yeah.
And ended up my junior year DJing Top 40 Radio at KROY, which was the local Top 40 radio station. It was 2 to 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings.
Yeah. So still, you're broadcasting.
It was a little bit of a dream come true, but in an odd way.
How did you make that jump from high school radio to professional radio DJ, even the 2 a.m. slot?
Persistence, the squeaky wheel, man. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. A buddy of mine's mom was dating a guy who knew a guy at the local radio station, and I just started calling him up and saying, hey, listen, what can I do? Can I come down and sweep floors? Can I come down? And they put me actually on doing a survey. I did all sorts of stuff for free for about 6 months. And once I was in the door, I started hitting up the program director every week, just being, again, that squeaky wheel that came in and said, I'm happy to be making phone calls here and asking people what they listen to and what kind of music they like and, what stations they're listening to and how we can be more aggressive in our, promotional and programming. But what I really want to do is be on the air. So when the slot opened up, 2 to 8 a.m. on Sunday mornings, a lot of public service, public affairs programming, but I did get to DJ for that first half hour and the last 90 minutes.
Oh, great.
So it was great. So that sort of 6:30 to 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning when all my pals were getting up and getting ready for church and everything, I was doing their morning drive.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
It was terrific. And it lasted for most of my junior year. And I was also involved in the theater. And when I got to college, someone teed me up to a gig that was happening at a local radio station that was a contemporary Christian rock station, KYLO in Davis. And I ended up doing an afternoon drive for them for 6 months when I was in college. And then I just sort of left radio behind. It wasn't a good fit for me.
In what way?
Just the temperaments and personalities of a lot of radio folks. There's some great people in radio. Sure. And I'm a huge NPR junkie.
Oh, man.
So I love me some good radio news. I love sports talk. I love,
When it's good, there's nothing like it. I love getting roped into that conversation.
Yep. But like music radio has changed a lot with the whole in Clear Channel and when they deregulated the industry. It sort of got corporatized. It got gobbled up. A lot of, even at KYLO in Davis, it was automated.
Really? We
had 6 reel-to-reels, and one of them was me. So I would front announce whatever was on reel number 2, and I could back announce whatever was on reel number 6. And but it was all automated. I recorded my show the night before for broadcast the next day. It was kind of a trippy situation. But that was 1984, not to date myself too late. But that was 1984, so that was early. I mean, now it's all on a computer, half the size of the one you're working with right there is what you hear on a lot of radio. Wow. If you're driving across the country, your Jack FMs and all that sort of thing is pre-programmed music radio. And now with Sirius, every station doesn't even have there's anybody who talks in between songs anymore.
I mean, it's essentially a promo guy. Does that stuff in a sits down and does an hour session that'll cover him for probably the month, unless they do a special event here or there or some special town hall with Billy Joel.
That's right.
Where the only real interaction that you're getting with anybody is if it's a call-in or a live thing.
That's right. So I veered off into the world of theater, film, and TV. And it came down to Los Angeles, with stars in my eyes and dreams of being on camera. Yeah. Did that for a few years. Picked up little spots on Beverly Hills 90210, Full House, did the face thing.
Yeah.
A couple of independent features. And then I was working with a company called the Actors Gang.
Oh, yeah. And Tim Robbins.
Indeed. I've been with them for 26 years, not to date myself.
Fantastic.
Too late. But in 1991... we had just finished doing this great production of The Good Woman of Szechuan at the Odyssey Theater here in town. And I was like, well, what happens next? And they're like, oh, we just sort of hang out, till Tim gets another movie and comes back with some money to do some theater.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, what do we do in the meantime? And I had this little radio show that I'd written, which was like a live radio theater.
Great.
In the sort of...
with live sound effects.
Live sound effects. And I was like, let's do that. And there was a coffee house in my neighborhood, Highland Grounds.
Okay.
Which was on Highland. I forget what it's called now. It became the street. But it was this little coffee house that was opening up in my neighborhood. And the first Thursday of the month, we did original radio theater for a year, 91 to 92, 12 months. And... it was a lot of fun. Mitch Watson came out of there, who is now a head writer on King Julian for DreamWorks.
Oh, wow.
And Tenacious D was born in those early, that first 12 months. And it was a great stomping ground for all of us to sort of flex our muscles.
Yeah.
And then I went to work at Klasky Csupo, the animation company. And I was a PA there for years. Worked my way up to manager, coordinator. I guess it goes the other way around, coordinator, manager, associate producer, producer. And by the end of the 3 years in production that I was there, I sort of started to feel like I'm a creative. This is not really my thing. I had a show that was starting to take off called Bat Boy the Musical, which has gone on and done stuff. So we were writing that at the time. It was gaining some heat. We did this, my writing partner, Brian Fleming, and I did a one-off pop-up film festival in Park City called Slum Dance. And because our film didn't get into Sundance, so we're like,
well, hey, just still show our
why
film
don't we
there?
just show up and do our own festival?
Right.
And we did. We put it together in about 6 weeks. And we were right on Main Street in the basement of the old Mrs. Fields Cookie Factory. It was gas. So that stuff was starting to take off. And we had an offer from IFC to do some stuff for them. And I went to my boss at Klasky Csupo at the time and said, hey, listen, if I could have a few weeks, I need just maybe a 10-week break so I can really focus on writing this show and then dealing with all this new stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
And she said, you know what? We've been kind of keeping an eye on you. And the new creative director of the studio, it feels like he's got everything under control except the voice talent. Would you be interested in stepping in as voice director on Rugrats?
Oh, wow.
And it was a dream come true. It was a gift for me. And I said, yeah. She said, yeah, you'll just work 1 or 2 days a week. You'll make about what you're making now, and you'll have your free time to write your show, and you'll be able to do all these other things, and we'll still keep you around here, and maybe you'll be doing something that you are really good at. So I did. I voice directed Rugrats for 5 years.
Wow.
The last 5 seasons of Rugrats were all mine, and that led to some Rugrats, at the time, CD-ROMs. Right? Which then became Rugrats video games. And that's where I met a lot of the people that I started working with and that I still work with today.
That's phenomenal.
As a voice director, and then coming back around to the performance side of it as well. It's like, as a writer, director, actor, I sort of rank them by what pays the bills.
Yes. Yes.
So totally for a while it was actor, director, writer. And then it was sort of, after a while it became director, writer, actor was kind of, the third one. And then over the last few years, it's sort of been director, actor, and writer. And writer seems to be coming back as Bat Boy is sort of trying to make its way back to New York. So
that's fantastic.
It's been a really, really, what a long, strange trip it's been, if I can quote Jerry Garcia.
And what I love about the fullness of this particular endeavor of, being a creative. That's really the only kind of title that covers all of it. And I mean, I came through Second City and it trained me. I went in there as an actor. I left as a director and a writer and a producer and all these things where you're constantly trying to, all right, well, if I'm not booking this thing, I want to be able to, I still want to work. I still want to create opportunities for myself and for my friends and for whoever is around and to be generating. And what an exciting time to be doing that. But what made it exciting is that you were doing it, and that added to the excitement of the time.
Yep. And that's the key, I think, is to be doing it. Just to don't let anything stand in your way. I mean, whether it's at a coffee house on Highland or whether you're, working for some of the biggest players in the business, you got to start somewhere and you have to make stuff. I mean, we didn't let the fact that our film didn't get into Sundance or Slam Dance stop us. And it was a notion. We were sitting on Santa Monica Boulevard, out in front of the theater one night. And I just turned to my partner, like, we should start our own festival. We should call it Slum Dance. Well, it could be like a tent city, and every tent could have a VCR and a TV, and people could walk up and down. You have these vagrants, walking up and down with shopping carts and VHS tapes, and you pick one, and we did it. And we had a main room, and we had a little 16 millimeter projected on a wall in the back, and it turned out to be the biggest party in Park City because we were real. Yeah. And we had brilliant design. My wife is a brilliant designer, and she tricked out that space. Oh, fantastic. So it felt like you were at someplace special.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was a real, and again, we spent money to do that. We didn't, that was not something that we ended up, but it ended up leading to, like I said, I worked with the IFC for years on a show called Split Screen. We got some really good attention, and it was great. And going into work, again, my wife led me to that PA job at Klasky Chupo because she didn't want to go back to it. She had gone on during hiatus to work for John Cristofalusi on Ren and Stimpy. So she was essentially the fan club director for Ren and Stimpy. Okay. And she loved that job. And she was like, you should go take that PA job. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm a part-time actor.
That's right. I got to maintain my availability just in case I got to go to a co-star audition.
That's right. She sat me down and she said, what do you want to do with your life? So I want to write, I want to direct, I want to act. She goes, there are writers in that building. Go meet them. There are directors in that building. And there are actors coming through there all day, every day. Go meet those people. Go do this thing. And I'm glad I did because like you, I learned also how to produce. Yeah. Even though it's not my skill set. And man, do I have respect for people who are elegant, easy producers. Oh man, do I love those people. It's not me. Yeah. I am, it's work for me. I can get it done, but it doesn't fit right. By the end of 3 years of doing it, I was having chest pains. Yeah. I was not sleeping well. All sorts of signs that I needed to be doing what I was good at. Yeah.
I totally understand that. I was a multimedia producer for maybe 3 years when I was back in Toledo before I started all this. Mm-hmm. And that opportunity led me into this. We needed, basically training on this system that we had built for this plastic bottle manufacturing company that was global and all of the material that we had produced, but people didn't understand exactly how to use the computer and the Laserdisc and all the things that were tied to it. And so I was like, I'll do it. I'll write something and produce it because I'm tired of logging all the footage from factories. And that started my producing career in this tiny building of 8 like-minded people and one boss who radically underbid the project. And but that skill set, that experience at that little company made it possible for me now to be comfortable doing self-tape, directing, just even doing this show. I'm coming out of pocket on this show because I want to make it, but I know enough to be dangerous and to have permission from not permission, but my wife's blessing to spend resources to develop the show.
Absolutely.
And it's that thing of I don't know where it's going to lead, but I need to make, period.
Yeah. I feel you. Carl Jung says, and I tell this to my students all the time, if you make a path to the forest starts making a path to you. And that intention, that knowing in your mind, like, this is what I do. This is what I'm good at. This is, if I keep working at it, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go in that direction. Yeah. And then it starts coming at you in the same way. And you find that with that, as opposed to sitting around and waiting for it, like, oh, gee, I wish I had a career in voiceover. I wish I had a career as a writer. No, get up and write.
Yeah.
My buddy Mitch Watson has been writing. The guy is the most dedicated writer I know. He writes every day and always has, even when he had a full-time job sitting next to me as a production coordinator at Klasky Chupa. We started there together. He was always going home and spending 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours in the evening writing stuff. And a lot of it was never produced, but a lot of it now is. Wow. Because he's honed that craft. He's the story editor on King Julian. He is all over. He's got a book out. He is a writer because he writes. You know, and we are actors because we act, whether we're getting paid or not.
That's right.
You know, we're going to be doing it. And hopefully you get to be, you know, our age. Yeah. And you get to do it for a living. You get to do it in the big leagues. So.
That's right. It's such a... it's cool to talk with you about. I had an experience with another guest where it was the same thing of kind of like, oh, wow, I thought I was the only person who did that. You know what I mean? Because right. you figure it out in this weird kind of way of like, if I record myself and play music and clamp it to a lamp or whatever your little system is, it's this compulsion to make something that lives on this crazy little cassette tape. You know?
Yeah. I had the TIAC 4-track cassette. I had that thing. I sat there a lot and tried, you know, tricking it out, flipping the tape over and backmasking, recording backwards stuff.
That's so awesome.
It was great. So yeah, and I love it. I mean, at home, I'm just now getting to the point where I'm starting to think about really building a studio that will live in my house. Yeah. You know, right now I'm in a converted closet. Yep. As I think a lot of us are. Yeah. It's quiet enough, but still I'm in there with my little 4-track, which is now my laptop, and my nice little microphone instead of the little cheesy one that came with the Radio Shack cassette deck.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
It's like hanging the thing on a hook so you can get to the tiny mic next to the record button.
Exactly. But I'm still playing. I'm still doing the same thing, and I get to go in there and make up characters every day. So
I love making my own demo reels.
Yeah.
Like that little, like making a 45-second sample of things I didn't know I was able to do or knew because I proved it in the car, but never captured it.
Yes. Indeed. You got to put it on tape. You got to write it down. You got to make it. You got to make something of it. You can't just, again, sit around and wait for it to come to you.
How long have you been teaching as well? Are you teaching?
Know, I don't do as much teaching as I should. Because I've just been so busy working. Yeah. But I talked to Bob Bergen about it, who teaches 4 times a year. And he says he just puts it on the calendar that he has 4 weekends a year that he has devoted himself to teaching. And he's got his little Ask the Pig thing that he does now too, which is fantastic.
That's great.
And I need to do that. I need to get back to that sort of giving back and helping others and bringing them up, because I really do enjoy it. And I get to guest at different workout groups and stuff. I have people who call me up around town and say, hey, can you come by and sit in with our workout group and see where we're at? Because it is about the future. I think voiceover is really special in that way, in that there is a mentor, mentality where those of us who've been in the business a little while are looking at the people who are coming up behind us and saying, come on. Mostly for me, don't make the same mistakes I did, and then do some of the things that I did. I mean, I look at some of the folks that I've been working with recently, and I'm just astounded by these late 20s, early 30s young guys who are coming up, who are really, really good at what they do and really, really focused and smart and have made all the right choices. Because I think there's so much more mentoring going on from all the books that are out there right now, from podcasts like this. Darren DePaul, who recently came out here to LA from New York with a dream of doing voiceover for video games and is now inundated with work. Man. Listened to podcasts like this, studied up on the industry because of the internet, because it was there for him. So, I mean, it didn't exist when I was coming up.
Me neither.
I didn't know, where to go, whose door to knock on, and if my wife hadn't shoved me into Klasky, I'd probably still be wondering.
And there was that perception, too, of the 25 people who have all the jobs. I don't know why 25, but maybe someone took a head count. But and that was certainly how it was in Chicago coming up in commercial, where it was like, well, that stuff is locked up, and guys like, Pete Stack are going to go over to AR and sit, wait for the faxes to come rolling in. And who do you think you are to come in here? That idea is completely shattered, and that you can and should do it from everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I'm constantly inspired by that and by people who are reaching out and saying, oh man, I booked 5 spots for Time Warner in my neighborhood, because that was, I say it all the time. I got started in on-hold messaging,
right?
And it's you just keep
going.
That's right.
You keep doing it. You got to start somewhere.
Got to.
Yeah,
got to.
Like some kids get lucky, get to come in and break in at the top. But that usually means a guy like Darren, who, was like a phenom. He showed up in town, and the next thing you know, he's doing the Star Wars things. He's on Overwatch. He's just like,
oh, wow.
He's exploded. Yeah. But you know what? He came out of the theater. He's a Broadway performer. He's a singer and an actor. He's honed his craft. He has worked more diligently than anybody I know. And that's how you get better, is by doing the work.
It's one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about. From my own personal experience, I'm sketch comedy. So that stage and working in the Second City every night helped tremendously to work on timing and all those other things. But what do you feel about how much the theater influenced and prepared you for this particular kind of character work, the life, and then we'll see where we go, dropping that grenade into the conversation. What?
Sure. Well, it was getting to work with the Actors Gang, which is similar to Second City in that we workshop in an improvised way. It's based on the characters of the Commedia dell'arte. And look it up because it will open a whole world for you. These stock characters, you have the Capitano who pretends to be, he's great with the ladies and he's a huge fighter, but really he's a coward. You know what I mean? And you've got, the Pantalone who's a penny pinching, money grubbing guy. You've got the 2 young lovers. You've got the Arlecchino character who's the wily servant. And you don't have to look much further than The Simpsons to see Chief Wiggum, Mr. Burns, and Bart as 3 characters that are pulled straight from the stock of the Commedia dell'arte. Man. So that improvisational tradition of being able to put on a stock character, get up on stage and see what happens is really, really what video game voiceover in particular is all about, because you don't know who your character is. You don't get a script ahead of time in video games. 99 times out of 100, you walk into that booth with a microphone, a music stand, and a stack of paper, Excel sheets, with no context whatsoever. It's just your character running down the page, and you have to go in and hopefully in partnership with a good director, make up a world and make that world happen. And it's a specialized skill and not everybody can do it. And that's what I've realized in the last 3 years. It kind of woke me up working with this negotiating committee and this whole process of negotiating this contract and really looking at what it is that video game actors in particular do. Because I've worked with celebrities, I've directed celebrities, up and down the aisle, and some of them have that sense of play, and they come in and they're just amazing. Jeff Goldblum comes to mind; he's amazing, and others are stymied, really, by the microphone, the music stand, and the stack of scripts, and because they haven't had a chance to look at it ahead of time. And a lot of new folks, a lot of folks who don't do this work regularly, really struggle with it. Really struggle with it. It's a specialized skill to be able to say, you alone have to make up this whole character, this whole world, this whole frequently long conversations. We got a lot of video game time to fill. Yeah. And it's extraordinary to watch the folks in this business who are really, really good at it do it well.
It's so interesting just having the process and the freedom to choose and be wrong and be like, you know what, I'm going to be totally wrong, but I'm going to make a strong choice. And even if it's completely inappropriate for where we're going, I know that someone will redirect me or tell me. Or it might be the thing that no one really thought of and go, oh my God, no, that totally works for that character to be a Pantalone in this world where I had expected him to be, something else. And but I'd never made that connection of Commedia dell'arte being something that would be so helpful in video game work. That's a really interesting observation.
Yeah, it is. It is really helpful. And I think improvisation in general, the ability to not be afraid of the unknown.
Yes.
Which is what improv teaches you. It's like you get on stage, you have no idea what's going to happen. And the idea is to accept a proposal and make a new one. Accept and give back, and accept and give back. And that's what actors in games do really, really well.
Yeah.
Is walk into a booth like not knowing.
Man.
Making choices in your auditions.
And that's right. Yeah. And just being comfortable with it. Indeed. And embracing it. And as much as people say, the worst time is getting in front of an audience and not having anything, I disagree. I think an audience is easier than because the audience knows you're improvising. If you're like, hey, welcome to an improv thing, we're going to do our thing. And I can probably, even if I fail in front of an audience now, it's better to fail in front of an audience than to fail in front of our one director. Where I go into a room and we're going to improvise from 12 to 5 to try to find something funny that the director thinks is great. And there's nothing to work off of. The director's just there sitting with a yellow pad going, next scene. That to me is...
I can't imagine that. That sounds terrifying.
It
sounds horrible. Because you don't know it's funny without an audience.
Right.
The audience tells you what's funny.
But when the director goes, that was funny, good, moving on, then you go.
I thankfully have never been that actor or that director.
Boy, that's
terrifying. Yeah.
That's a challenging space to be. So that kind of makes it, but it makes playing in front of an audience so much easier in that respect too.
Like I said, you have to have an audience, I think, especially with comedy, because how do you know if it's funny?
That's right.
How do you know?
And sometimes they don't give you anything, and afterwards they're so effusive.
Right.
That was great.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story about that very, very thing with Bat Boy. When we were doing the production here in Hollywood, we had a night on the show. I mean, normally the show is just, it's funny, but it's also filled with heart. I mean, the show also really has some deep messages, and it's very easy to lose sight of that in the comedy. But it's always intended to be a comedy, even though the characters shouldn't know that they're in a comedy, right?
Yeah.
One night, nobody was laughing. And I just sat there in the back of the house like, oh, what have we done wrong? And at the end of the show, when the curtain came down, the audience leapt to their feet with an ovation like I've never heard before.
Wow.
And the actors that night and the audience had just keyed into the tragic elements of the story.
Wow.
And they were so engaged with what was going on that they didn't laugh out loud.
Yeah.
But they were totally 100% engaged. And it's like you said, sometimes people are having a great time and they're just either not as demonstrative or they're getting something else that you're doing that you were unaware of.
Yes.
And that's why audiences, I think, are so important. And again, that's why VO actors are so unique in that without an audience to tell you, they're still able to create characters and moments that resonate with an audience down the line.
Yeah.
It's like a film.
That's right.
It's like working in film. Same thing. You're setting up, but still even there you have a crew of 40 or 50. In the VO booth, you've got an audience of 5. And maybe you throw a few producers in, maybe 8.
And you don't get, that's right. And you don't get the immediate response often too on the line or that kind of thing because you're recording or isolated or it's a back and forth. And you so have to trust how it feels in a way.
And if you've got a director on the other side of the glass who's working with you. So a lot of times I imagine myself as a director, I want to be the actor's best audience. And that's part of my job, is to respond to what they're doing and to work in partnership with an actor to create a performance. And I've been blessed to be able to have been able to do that a lot.
That's always such a wonderful feeling when you go into the booth to know that you've got a director who empathizes with the experience of being on the other side, and it's I cut my teeth in commercials, so I didn't have that experience that often.
No, you sit there and you're wearing cans and there's somebody in St. Louis.
Yeah, going, that was great. Let's do it again. Okay. Any redirects or any suggestions?
No.
Well, you got to fit it in 9.
Right.
And right now it's at 7. So take your time.
Yep.
All right.
I did taglines for Hornitos Tequila, right? And so my line was, Hornitos Premium Tequila, purer than your intentions. That was the line. So I walk into the booth and I do it 3 times in a row, and then they start redirecting. All right, let's try it with a little bit of an accent. Let's try it without the accent. All right, now a really, really heavy accent. Okay, try pitching it up a little bit. And about half an hour later, we'd probably done it. Those 12, 13 words, we'd probably done them 100 times. Yeah. And I'm walking out and thanking the engineer for his time and for hooking it up. He's like, they're going to take the second take. It was perfect, dude. And I said, yeah, but so what?
Yeah.
So what?
So what?
I was here for 30 minutes. And yeah, okay, I'll try it any way you want to do it. Let's do it again. Let's do it again and again and again and again and again. And you take the second take, more power to you. Yeah. And that was a good spot. I ran on 6 different spots for 2 years, and my kids got to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
And,
right.
All that stuff was able to happen because of that 25 minutes when I was like, sure, you bet. Let's do it again. Now, we don't have time to do that in video games. We've usually got scripts that stack to the ceiling that we have to get through. So we move really quickly, and we take the instinct and in a way that commercials don't. But I never begrudge them. It's always weird when you're like, and you just keep saying okay and doing it again.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're paying you to do.
That's what they're paying you to do.
Yeah.
And we may find something. I might have my preconceived idea of what I did in the audition and what I came in with, or I might have gotten the opportunity to listen to the audition before and go in and all right, let's do it. But I'm here. It's interesting. Just because, and I've had this conversation with a couple folks about, in particular, that sort of attitude that we go into the booth with, of trust of like, look, I'm a dispenser of emotion, of not only your content, but that's what I'm like this is so like Bob Ross, Southern California, but I'm a tree for you to pluck what you need, and hopefully you don't leave me completely raw and bare at the end of this session.
Yep. I always say that the best actors, and I think directors too, are have a servant mentality.
Yeah.
That's the idea, is that the job of the actor, with the help of the director, is to take the author's words and deliver them to the audience with clarity and precision and emotion. And that's really what we're doing.
Yeah.
And, whether it's animation or video games or you're selling cereal, it's the same thing. My job is to take the words on the page and deliver them to the audience with clarity, precision, and emotion so that they can receive what the author intended.
Yeah.
That's the job.
We're a delivery system.
We're a delivery system.
We are the service industry.
Yeah. And be a servant.
Yeah.
Have a servant. And the best actors do. What can I do? How can I be better? How can it be clearer? How can I get this across more powerfully, more elegantly? How can I do it?
Oh, that's great.
It's true.
It's great. It is true. And I find that spirit to be coming from the Midwest. It wasn't the expectation that I think that is told among people. Oh, in LA, blah, blah, blah. But I find that among, in particular, the people, the people who are making their living and providing health insurance for their families, people who are out here walking that tightrope, are the most engaged in that space of like a true open heart and really wanting to make certain that everything is delivered properly.
Yep.
And is served up.
And I think in voiceover especially, because there is no reliance on physical appearance.
Yeah.
Because that's out of the equation. The idea of being a famous voiceover person was almost, I mean, it's a little more known today because people are paying attention and they want to see folks at their conventions and stuff like that. But still, there's a level of anonymity that goes along with it that isn't necessarily on the other side. When you start getting recognized by people on the street, people who've had an emotional experience that you weren't there for.
Yes.
It sort of throws things out of balance. And it's even true for VO performers, but a lot of times we get to sort of skirt that.
Yeah.
because they don't know what we look like. Yeah.
If you introduce yourself, then they can have that moment. I had that this weekend over at Stan Lee's Kamikaze, or the LA Comic-Con. They've changed the name of it now. But that very question was from a guy who was like, what's it like to be anonymous and people know who you are? And do you prefer the anonymity, or do you? And I do a fair amount of on camera too, so it is that sense of like, you know, I kind of like going to Ralph's and buying apples and going home.
Yep. You know? I think the VO people have that mentality, have that idea like, wow, I get to make my living in the entertainment industry, and I get to preserve my privacy.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It's not that great, kids.
It's not that great. Anonymity. I traded it.
It's not that great. Don't even bother.
Can I ask you what it's been like? Because you mentioned the past 3 years that you've been on the interactive committee in negotiations and stuff, and what that experience has been like for you. And first off, thank you for that, for your time, and because it's not a paid position.
No, it's not.
It's you're doing it on behalf of all actors and not just members of SAG-AFTRA, but all future actors, and going to have a conversation on something that people have been afraid to even mention. I remember the first video game I did in 2004 for Rockstar in Detroit, and I played like the Detroit boss in a Midnight Club 3 dub edition. And I remember asking one of the New York day players, like, what's the story on how do we get any? Is there any? And they were like, don't even say it.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that was the nature of the conversation, was like, don't even talk about it here. We're in the volume right now.
Yeah. Well, it's another one of those careful what you wish for, make a path to the forest moments. Because I remember very clearly sitting with my wife and grousing for the umpteenth time about the union and whatever the latest misstep that it was making. And I realized as I was chatting with her that it's so easy to sit on the sidelines and grouse. But if you want change to happen, you have to get involved. Yeah. That it wasn't the union. It's actually my union. I paid money to be part of this group. I pay money every 6 months to keep the doors open down on Wilshire Boulevard and all around the country.
Yeah.
I'm a part of it's my union. And I said, you know what? And it was a toss-off. I was like, I should get involved and do something. Well, it wasn't too much longer after that I got a phone call from a woman named Jill King, who's a community organizer. You probably have sat down and had lunch with her. Yeah. And she called me up. Bob Bergen had given her my number. And she said, can I take you out to lunch and talk to you about the interactive agreement? And I, like you, started in interactive really in earnest in 2004.
Really?
Which was the last time that things were really, not the last time, but the first time for me that things were really like approaching, talking about strikes and talking about secondary payments and talking about, and it was going on around me. I was working on a game called God of War.
Sure.
Yeah. And so everybody that was coming in had an opinion about it. And I'm in that unique position where I'm seeing all the actors coming through. Yeah. And I just sort of polled folks and I started listening to what they were saying. And
just a side note, were you directing on that game?
I was directing on that game,
so you were as a member of SAG at that point and AFTRA prior to our unification. Yep. But they're listening and having that conversation. Okay. Gotcha.
It's like, what's going on? There's, everybody in the waiting room was talking about, whether or not we're going to go on strike. And so I started listening, and I never really stopped listening. And I think I really understand the needs of actors in a way that any individual actor doesn't. And I always thought you all knew each other. I always thought like, oh yeah, don't you? Kiff, don't you? And they're like, I think I've heard him on stuff. I was like, oh, that's right. Because you don't sit in my chair as a casting director and as a voice director. I know all y'all. And so just being able to listen to the community and what was really important. And that's what SAG started doing. When Jill took me out to lunch that day, I realized that SAG-AFTRA had invested in organizers. They put organizers on staff to go out into the community and listen to what the actors actually needed and wanted and were willing to fight for. And I thought, this is great. And when she called me up a few months later and said, we're going to do some house meetings, do you want to come? I said, of course, because I wanted to be part of this movement.
Yeah.
And so we did a bunch of house meetings where we sort of identified the 4 planks that are sort of in our ask in this contract negotiation now. And then I was getting on a plane to go to New York City, I think, and I got a text from Ken Howard, who is the president of the union, asking me if I wanted to chair the negotiating committee. And I thought it was a mistake, that he sent it to the wrong guy, because I couldn't imagine. I'm nobody. I came literally out of nowhere. And to be asked to take that responsibility was certainly a mistake. So I called Jill and I was like, he doesn't really mean chair, right? He just means sit on the committee. Like occupy a chair in a room.
Sit behind staff. Let the people who are, He
meant sit in a chair, right? She's like, no. I said, that's crazy. And she said, I know, but we believe that you can do this.
Yeah.
And so I get that organizing effort that the union took is the reason that we're here today. And it's the reason that we have a unity and that we're going to hang together, I think, is because we've been listening to our community. And we're just trying to get what this community's been asking for 10, 12, 15 years. And if you talk to some people who were back there in 94, some of our agents said, why don't we have a secondary payment structure in this contract from the beginning back in 94? And like, oh, it's too small. This is a small, little, tiny, they don't use much VO. And we just want to make sure that there's a contract in place. And
minimum system requirements.
Right.
And you can't, in some respects, it's hard to fault people 20 some odd years ago for figuring out which direction things were going to go. And, if we all were, groundhogs, that's the dumbest analogy ever. But if we all
because groundhogs see into the future.
Because they do. If they could speak English, they would tell us what we're doing wrong. But if we had that ability, I mean, who knows? I mean, God, sometimes you're just trying to look, 2 weeks into the future and figure out how I'm going to make rent.
That's absolutely right. But here we are today, and we've been fighting this fight for a long time, and it's been very useful on the producer's side to have 2 unions that they could play off each other.
That's right.
Because I was there in 2008 when the SAG side was saying, no, we're not going to sign this contract. We have to have some sort of secondary payments. And they're like, oh, what about you, AFTRA? Oh, we'll sign it.
Yeah.
And so I watched all the business run to AFTRA. And I don't make any judgments about that, but that's just what happened.
Right.
And that was very effective and very easy for them to do. But now we are unified as one union. Yeah. So there's no place else they can go to peel us off. And we're really hanging together as a community in ways that we never have before.
I feel that right now. Yeah. It's really, really cool.
Because it was the intention of the union to make that happen. The intention was Jill King took lunch with close to 100 of us and asked us all the same questions. What do you know about the interactive contract? How would you like to see it change? And do you know any of these people? And can you help me take lunch with them. And she listened.
Wow.
She wasn't trying to put forward anything. In these house meetings, we listened, we talked, and we hashed it out. We came up with what we felt, and then we formed a committee.
Yeah.
And then we hashed out what our ask would be based on industry standards and best practices.
Yeah.
Not only from the video game industry, but from animation, from commercial, from all the industries that we work in. The idea of a secondary payment in particular is not foreign to actors.
Right.
It's how we live. Right. And our performance is our intellectual property.
That's
which I will now call IP. Now that everybody knows what I'm saying when I say IP, it's intellectual property. That's our performance, and it's viewed as such, so that when I go in and I say Hornitos Premium Tequila Purer Than Your Intentions, every time the company takes that intellectual property, my performance of those words, and uses it to sell tequila, I get a little bit of money. Every time the character I do on Legend of Korra plays on a television station where they're selling advertising, I get a little bit of that advertising because I helped to create it. So in the world of video games, that doesn't exist. Right. And we're not asking for a royalty payment. We're not asking for a piece of every single unit that goes out the door,
right,
which would not be unheard of.
No. There's
certainly precedent for that.
Is that how it works with the recording industry? For example, if they're going to use Aerosmith's, Sweet Emotion in a game, would they get a piece of every single? The royalty is essentially the same in that way.
There's a company that exists to sell you the rights to use that Sweet Emotion in your video game or whatever, and they set a price for that, and that money is shared usually with the authors of the song as opposed to the performers of the song. If I'm not mistaken, please, ASCAP folks, let me know. But yeah, the idea is you get paid every time that your intellectual property is sold. So we decided that in this space that we would prefer a model that's more of a shared prosperity model, and that we would only want to share in the wealth of the most successful games on the planet, both because they're making money, and B, because that's where the union performers exist. The video game world is a vast world.
Yes.
There are all sorts of app games that don't use voiceover. There are all sorts of app games that maybe use a little tiny bit of non-union voiceover. There are independent games, which are sort of on the rise right now. Yeah. I'm really excited about the way independent games are sort of expanding and creating new worlds that aren't just run through a desert and shoot people.
All those games are my daughter's favorite, and the next generation are playing games like Undertale, where it's just where it's, this is the game that I played in 1991 on my, why are you playing this?
Because it's a great story and it's well told.
Story. That's right.
So anyway, when we get to the triggers for these secondary payments, which are every 2 million units up to 8. At 2 million units, that's when most video games, according to our studies, start to make money. And once you get to a game that sells 2 million or more, if it uses voiceover, it's using union talent. So again, we just sort of looked at the precedent of it. And that's where we put our ask. Yeah. And, actors are blowing their voices out.
Yep.
In recording sessions. We have stories of actor Steve Bloom told us, if you listen to, he's got one, it's at gameactorsforall.com. You can listen to Steve. He talks for about 7 minutes about what it is that we're asking for and his experience. And he talks about, vocal stress. And he mentions that he's passed out in sessions. He's tasted blood at the back of his throat in sessions. He has vomited in the booth from these characters that he is creating that are so textured and high volume. Yeah. So we want to try to keep actors working. That's, I think, the biggest goal that our committee has, is to try to keep actors working. And when you have folks who are out for 2 or 3 weeks at a time because they've hemorrhaged their vocal cords, that's got to stop. We've got to figure out how to address that problem and make it better.
Yeah, 100% agree. Why do you feel it's important? And I I just want your language on it, truthfully, for people who are not in necessarily either in this union or in this market right now, for something to them to stand in solidarity with.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be your contract eventually. I would hope that folks would be like me and aspire to work under a union contract. You get great health care, you get a good pension plan, you're paid fairly, and you're paid when you're not working, so that when you get used up or overexposed, or people are tired of hearing you or seeing your face, that there's still a revenue stream that's based on the intellectual property that you've created over the course of your career. And that doesn't exist in the non-union world.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take too long, I think folks will find, for you to become overexposed. That your day in the sun. We all know, if you've been in this business for 20 or 30 years, you see cycles that come and go. I mean, things were great for me in the 90s, and they weren't so great in the early 2000s. And they've come back, and I knock wood and hope that that continues. But I also know the reality of it is that this is a cyclical business. Yeah. And so when things are down, you hope that you go to the mailbox looking for those checks for that work that you've done before. You know, the Full House episode, 2 Full House episodes I did in 1991 still pay me a couple $100 a year. Why? Because they're selling advertising, you know, and you'll take a look at the industry. This is a union industry, this town.
Yeah.
Hollywood is a factory town, and it's a union factory. Everybody from the drivers on up to the
makeup
to the celebs.
Yep.
Every job is a union job, and it's a thriving industry. It ain't hurting.
Right.
Warner Brothers is just down the street. They're still open for business.
That's right.
Fox across town is still open for business. Universal Studios right here in the backyard is doing boffo business. They're making money. And
they're innovating and creating the next technologies and figuring out what to put on those emerging technologies, from VR to all of it.
Yep. And so the argument that having to pay union talent, union wages is going to somehow destroy any industry is it's just a non-starter, because all you have to do is look around and see the truth of what unions do for everybody.
Oh man!
You know, there was a day not too long ago, and I talk about this a lot in connection with the video game world, because people always say 15-hour days, 7 days a week, months at a time.
Right.
And I work with these people. They sit next to me at the table when I'm directing. But it wasn't too long ago that actors were working 15-hour days, 7 days a week, for contracts that they were locked into for 7 years at a time. And even if they became movie stars, were required to be paid $50 a week.
That's right.
And the folks at the top of the studios were getting filthy rich. And the performers were not only working 15 hours, 7 days a week, but they were told who they were going to marry. They were told who they were going to support for public office. They were told what commercials they were going to do. And none of that was extra until somebody decided to stand up and say, hey, this isn't fair. This isn't right. This is hurting my family. And some people, brave folks, got together and stood up and decided that they would form a union. And it's those folks who really did the yeoman's work. So we understand in the recesses of our past what it is to be overworked and underpaid, and to have working conditions that are unhealthful. So I think there's a lot of, especially in the VO community, there's a lot of solidarity and empathy with the folks who are on the development side.
Yes, absolutely.
So
it's that, you know, this perception of the idea that what we do is like, you know, get my money for nothing, get my chicks for free, you know, and it doesn't take long to see when you actually do it, when you're in there and either you're wrung out or you can't deliver what the producer's looking for, and you've given every angle of what you can generating your IP, and they're still on the other side of the glass with their finger on the talk down, shaking their head going, maybe we should call it for today. And then that feeling of walking out going, this shouldn't be so hard. But today it is, and then pulling yourself out of bed the next day and chasing more work.
Yeah.
All those things. It is you can look at the benefits of any gig and look at, and be like, man, you must be living the life. You get to see the country and drive a rig and be free and listen to Howard Stern all day.
Right.
I mean? But like every specific gig has its unique challenges, and right now this is one of our unique challenges that we're working towards. And
it is,
yeah.
And it's just a matter of trying to bring this contract into the 21st century.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's in our ask that isn't based on precedent and standards and the way this entertainment industry has run for years. The game corporations would like to believe that they're technology companies. But that's laughable.
Yeah.
In the fact that, was it a technology company when the guy took a movie camera and put it on the train tracks and filmed a train coming at him? It's a technology company. We use technology every day. We've got lights that turn on in this building. You're working at a computer here. But when you're electronic arts, it's in your name.
Right.
You are an arts company.
Right.
And that's just the way it is. You are an entertainment. Anytime that there are people performing who are trying to elicit a response from an audience, that's a performing arts company.
Right.
That is an entertainment field. They're not selling TVs. They're not selling,
right.
mixers and microphones. They're selling entertainment, is what they're selling. So there's just that's not an argument at all for me. We use technology. We do. The entertainment industry runs on technology. New cameras come out, new lighting equipment comes out, new microphones come out, and there are technicians. We're surrounded by technicians in all the work that we do. But all that technology is in service of creating an emotional response in an audience, and that's entertainment.
Oh, man. That, yes. Thank you for saying all that, and thank you for sharing your perspective and experience through this thing, because it's, obviously it brings a lot of stress to people, and people are afraid of confrontation and that kind of thing, but you can't just not stand up and say what we provide is of tremendous value outside of for you, but for the audience at large and for ourselves.
And what we've tried to do as we move toward this, and we still, there's an invitation from our committee to the corporations, to this industry, to recognize. I mean, our final offer was an either-or offer, where we said, hey, listen, if it's better for you to pay a little more upfront, we're okay with that. But let's at least have the option for the folks who don't have that money to spend up front to have a secondary payment structure that they can have. So it's an either or. It's a path for you to never have to pay a secondary payment if you don't want to. But for someone else who would rather
they have that choice.
Save the payment for later can have the choice. And we were categorically refused. And that's when the talks were over. And the goal from that moment on has been to keep our members working as much as we can. Yeah. So this strike, excuse me, is targeted at those companies who refused to take that choice. And we're not striking the folks around them. And we're trying to create new opportunities for indie developers to use union talent in their games. And we're trying to create a new culture that's based on industry standards and best practices. And hopefully those folks will see the light.
Yeah.
And they'll come back to the table because they do have the best talent in the business at their fingertips. And all they need to do is come back to the table and make a deal that our community, which we've talked about, is organized.
Yeah.
These proposals didn't come out of a black hat down at the union hall behind closed doors.
Right.
They came from actors who work this contract every day. And this is what we're asking for. It's not unreasonable. It is industry standard. It adheres to best practices. It's about safety. And sharing in the prosperity of the biggest blockbuster games on the planet, your Call of Duties, your Grand Theft Autos, your Transformers. I mean, all those games that go out there, the Star Wars series, those games that we had one of the actors in one of our meetings one night said, remember that movie that made $1 billion opening day? Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in the film world.
Not at all.
Nobody makes $1 billion on opening day except video games.
Right. And when a game, and what's been waking people up in my conversations with people has been the re-release.
Right.
Like, BioShock Infinite just was ported for Xbox One and PS4.
Yep.
And someone who's not in the industry was like, so you're going to get a little taste of that, right? I was like, what? No. I'm not getting any taste of that.
Nope.
And that's when the realization hits them. Well, that ain't. They just re-released.
They're going to make how much?
Yeah. And and it's hard because, I love Ken Levine. I love working on that game. And it's not about the developers.
Of course not.
Of
course not.
So
we feel for them. We understand it.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago that we were under the same situation.
Yeah.
Working for corporate overlords and being forced into work situations that were risking our health and destroying our families and all sorts of other stuff. You're not meant to work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week for months at a time.
Right. Keythe, I could talk to you all day. This has been...
We're not going to leave it there, are we?
No, we're not going to leave it there.
Can we talk about exciting things that are coming in the future?
What exciting things are coming in the future? What do you have? What do you have personally? Well, let me ask this question. It's been one of my favorite things. Of the things that you've done, either as a director or as a writer or even as a performer, what thing have you gone like, I wish more people would experience that because I'm really freaking proud of that work. Would love people to experience that, and and even if it's something that got a lot of love, but you just it's got a special place in your heart. What would that piece be?
I think playing Thane Krios in the Mass Effect series. It was terrific writing. I got to work with Ginny McSwain, who comes from the same place I do as a director, and we got to work together to create intimacy in video games, which is unheard of. And to be able to do that with her at the helm and to make that happen, that was something I was really, really proud of. That's a big one. A small one, just this last weekend, I got to do a production with a company I'm involved with called Fake Radio. We did Orson Welles' 1939 broadcast of the War of the Worlds, and I got to play the Orson Welles role. And again, it's that when good writing comes along and you can just get out of the way and there's nothing, you're not forcing anything, you're just allowing the writing to sort of carry you along. That happened in Mass Effect, and it happened on Saturday night. Even it was an audience of, 75, 100 people who'd come out, and we gave them this little Halloween treat that Orson Welles created 80 years ago. And that was just a sheer joy. So I look forward to more stuff like that.
Amen.
We'll keep talking. Talking with you has been great. This has been a lot of fun.
I've had so much fun talking and getting to know you a little bit. And again, as I've been watching from updates and all that other kind of stuff, it's just been wonderful to be able to sit face to face and have a conversation about the
and I'll tell you again, I'll just plug Game Actors for All. That's either the number 4 or FOR. Game Actors for All is a website where there's a lot of really good information that's going on. You can always navigate the SAG-AFTRA website, SAG-AFTRA.org. That's SAGAFTRA.org/interactive is where a lot of the information about what we're doing, where we're going to be. If you want to come out and hang out with your favorite VO peeps, walk a picket line, we're doing some of that.
That's right.
And not a lot of it because we're trying to keep our actors working.
Yeah.
Again, we're going to show up and do these things, for a couple hours here and there, just to keep folks knowledgeable about the fact that we're not working on certain games, but really we're trying to keep our members working as much as we can. And they work in animation, they work in promos, they work in commercials. None of that is being struck. Right now, we're just not working for some of the biggest video game corporations on the planet. And it's only because they don't want a choice.
Well, I hope things. I hope they will return to the table and be willing to have this conversation.
Me too.
And thank you again for being there for that. That's great. And thank you for being here today too and sharing your story and all that stuff. And just I don't know. I'm inspired by everything that you're up to and want to continue doing it too.
It's a pleasure. I love it.
How can people find you in social media like Twitter and stuff like that?
I have a Keythe Farley is Kick-Ass Voiceover on that's my company name, Kick-Ass Voiceover, on the Facebooks. I'm at Faroneer on the Twitter.
Great.
And you could look up Keythe Farley. It's Keythe Farley, not Keith. That'll also help you find me. So I look forward to meeting your peeps.
Awesome. I'm sure they'll look forward to meeting you, and I hope that those of you who've listened, if you've gotten to this point, you've clearly listened, because this isn't tuning in to a later broadcast. You just listen to the whole thing. So thank you so much for doing that. And we will holler at you with another episode soon. Take care. Peace. Thank you for joining us on All Over Voiceover with Kiff VH. Please take a moment to review the show and let other folks know what you thought. And if you dug it, please subscribe. Follow the show on Twitter at AllOverVO and check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/AllOverVO with Kiff VH. That's it for this time. You get what you get and don't get upset. Claim victory and depart the field.